We are anonymous. Last time, we followed the trail of purged generals and a broken chain of command inside the Pentagon. You might think that was the endgame. You thought removing the guardrails was about ego. Look closer. When a Defense Department is hollowed out, when the generals who say no are replaced by silence, it is never just for show. A stage is being set. Look at this report from Axios. A sitting lawmaker is calling for the 25th Amendment. Not an impeachment, not a censure. The 25th Amendment, the emergency brake to rip the commander-in-chief from power. Why the sudden panic on Capitol Hill? Because they see what the records show. A president with absolute authority, preparing an unchecked military strike. They are terrified. But are they terrified of the right thing? Here is where the trail gets dangerous. Let's ask the question nobody dares to broadcast. What if the massive military buildup, the whispers of an all-out war with Iran, have absolutely nothing to do with the Middle East? What if this entire global crisis is actually a domestic operation? Follow the timeline. Look at the calendar. We are accelerating toward the midterm elections. I want you to remember this detail. By the time we finish, you will understand exactly who the weapons are pointed at. Start with the public statements. Reuters tracked the press briefings. The president stands at a podium and promises massive, uncompromising strikes on Iran. Hours later, the defense secretary steps up and repeats the exact same phrasing, word for word, a perfect echo. In a normal administration, the Pentagon provides military restraint. They calculate risk. Here, the military apparatus is acting as a megaphone for the Oval Office. Is this a genuine security threat? Or is this a manufactured crisis designed to lock the country into a state of emergency just when political opposition is trying to organize? Now trace this back to the man delivering those messages, Pete Hegseth. Remember the Signalgate leak? A Secretary of Defense sharing classified strike details on a civilian messaging app. In any other era, that is a career-ending breach of protocol. Yet, the president protected him, kept him in power. Why? Follow the logic. If you are preparing to operate your military like a private company, you do not want a secretary who respects procedure. You want a secretary who owes you his survival. Hegseth's vulnerability isn't a flaw. It is the feature that guarantees his absolute submission. If you think this submission only applies to foreign wars, you aren't looking hard enough at the domestic front. The Washington Post uncovered a bizarre incident. A military helicopter flying dangerously low, harassing protesters near Kid Rock's property. An investigation was launched. Then, suddenly, the investigation vanished. The defense secretary shut it down after the president downplayed it. Does a multi-million-dollar military asset get used to intimidate protesters over a celebrity dispute? If standard military discipline can be erased to protect a friend of the White House, what else can be erased? The trail leads out of the country. Reuters pressed Hegseth on whether the United States would honor Article 5 of the NATO alliance, the bedrock of Western security. His response? He refused to commit. He deferred entirely to the president. Think about what that really means. The institution of the Pentagon has officially abdicated its international independence. The United States military is no longer a treaty partner. It is a tool, waiting for a single man to push the button. And now the puzzle pieces click together. Remember the empty chairs at the Pentagon? The top-tier generals fired overnight? We were told it was about removing politics from the military. Look at the board now. The purges were never about reform. They were about eliminating friction. They removed anyone with stars on their shoulder who might say no to an illegal strike, or no to deploying troops on American soil. They built a system where no one can stop the machine. This brings us back to the midterm elections. The true target was never just Iran. Imagine the country locked in a spiraling Middle Eastern conflict, a wartime president demanding total loyalty, a military apparatus that has been purged of its independent thinkers, ready to execute any order, domestic or foreign. How do you vote against a commander-in-chief when doing so is painted as treason during a global crisis? They are securing the election not with ballots, but with the threat of war. The Pentagon has been tamed. The NATO alliance is neutralized. Iran is the catalyst. But institutions are like dominoes. Once the strongest one falls, the rest follow effortlessly. If they could rip the soul out of the Department of Defense without consequence, look at what is left. The intelligence agencies, the Department of Justice, the electoral system itself. Who is next on the chopping block when the war drums start beating? We gave you the pieces, the coordinated threats, the halted investigations, the purged generals. We showed you a military structure that has been converted into a private security force for the Oval Office, a force that answers only to loyalty. Are we watching a necessary restructuring of a broken system? Or have we already witnessed a soft coup? Is the call for the 25th Amendment a hysterical reaction from politicians losing their grip? Or is it the final, desperate pull of an emergency brake before the country is driven off a cliff into a war it never wanted? The clock is ticking. The midterms are coming. The Pentagon has been purged, but they are just one piece of the board. An unchecked war machine requires global communications, satellites, and data networks. Infrastructure the government no longer completely owns. Look at the man standing in the shadows with the keys to the sky. What exactly is Elon Musk's role in this privately run war machine? Who do you think is really in charge? Comment below.